When I'm asked about fruitful practices, spiritual practices for families, the Ignatian prayer of Examen comes to mind. There are 3 ripe times in the life of the family for this prayer. One is at bedtime, just right before you've given your 47th glass of water, before you tuck your kids into bed. Another time is a shared meal, whether that shared meal is breakfast on a Saturday morning or whether that shared meal is dinner at night. And the car, the best example in modern society of solitude often happens in the car. If we just turn the radio down, cars are wonderful times for family prayer. The Ignatian Examen teaches children to reflect on their lives, their actions, their own desires. How many of us are out of touch with our own desires, their longings, and yes, even their faults? It also teaches children to recognize and respond to the movement of God in their lives. Ours is often a problem of seeing. God is always at work. God is always moving. God is always reaching towards us. But ours is a problem of recognizing that movement of God. And the Ignatian Examen, prayer of Examen, can help us. Just for remembering, I made handy-dandy cards to remind us of these 5 steps, these 5 movements in the prayer of Examen. The first is to become aware of God's presence. And these can be done bodily, which is incredibly important when we're with our children. It's incredibly important for adults, but especially for children. We can learn from our Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters. We can use the sign of the cross. Just a bodily way of recognizing, oh yes, God is here. Another way is to kneel at our bedsides. And that's an old practice that maybe needs a little revitalization. Just kneeling as a bodily sign of, oh yes, God is here. A wonderful practice is for parents to gather up their children into their arms at night as they're tucking them into the bed, as a sign of God's, oh yes, God, this Trinitarian community of love is here with us, and just gather them up into your arms. Maybe your children can help you choose for your family only, sort of sign, a bodily sign of God's presence. And then what you want to do next, the second step, is to review the day in chunks. And I like to use meal times as markers. So if you're praying the Examen at night, maybe you want to think back from bedtime to dinner, dinner to lunch, lunch to breakfast, and then breakfast through sleep. Be sure and include sleep in your Examen. And in those chunks, you want to look for the graces. When did you encounter goodness? When did you encounter something incredibly beautiful? Taking from 1 Corinthians 13 and Galatians 5, when did you experience the fruit of the Spirit? When did you experience love or joy or peace or patience or kindness? That's how we look back for the good. And then we also want to look back for the growth. So when did we have the opportunity to share in kindness, but instead we chose unkindness? Or maybe when did we have a chance to show generosity to someone and instead we were stingy? Is there someone we need to say we're sorry to? Is there, do we need to seek God's forgiveness? So it's a time, again, we want to look back through those meal markers and those chunks of time, and where do I need some growth? And the next step in the Examen is to talk with Jesus about it. So we just take those graces and those growths and we have a conversation with Jesus about it, both listening and talking. And parents, it's incredibly important that at this point, you help your children hold a picture of Jesus in their mind, a picture of Jesus that has gentle eyes, that is smiling at them. Because we can never, even adults, we can never really honestly admit those areas of growth if we see a stern, angry Jesus. We just won't do it. Self-preservation won't let us do it. But if we see the Jesus in Psalm 23, the good and loving shepherd, well, we can go into those very difficult places and we can both talk to Jesus and listen to Jesus. And the last step of the examen is to think about tomorrow. So as we look forward and we think about tomorrow, we think about those areas where we are anxious or worried about tomorrow, or maybe something we're excited about, those strong emotions that we feel. And again, we talk to Jesus about them. Maybe we ask for his help. Or maybe at that point it's when our parents, or often when I have practiced the examen with my children, that's when they wrap their arms around me and say, "Oh, Mom, we're going to pray for you for that." And then just end the examen with one more sign of God's presence and reverence. Maybe again, it's the sign of the cross. You just put that right in your hand. Maybe it's holding hands. Maybe it's a family group hug. Maybe it's that. May God meet you in this practice of examen.